Hi everyone, my name is Dan Myers. I'm the president of Misericordia University, which is a small college in northeastern Pennsylvania. And you may not have heard of Misericordia, but I bet you have heard of Notre Dame, where I was a faculty member and administrator for many years. During that time that I was at Notre Dame, I started giving a workshop for new faculty members on managing workload in their lives as faculty members. And for many years, it was part of our new faculty orientation at Notre Dame. And I was talking to a friend about this recently, and she suggested that I share it more broadly. So I decided to record it and release it on YouTube. Why not? Maybe it'll help somebody. Um, and while the general message of this little workshop is good for just about anyone, the content is really geared mainly to people who are new or soon to be new faculty members at a college or university. That would be people who are, within a couple of years of starting their first appointment as a faculty member, or advanced graduate students who'll be taking on those kinds of roles before too long, and in many ways already are as an advanced graduate student. Before I get started, just a little bit about me so you know who you're talking to here. I was a faculty member at Notre Dame for 17 years, and I started there right out of graduate school after finishing my PhD at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And my research work was focused on a number of different things, but primarily riots, game theory, social diffusion processes, poverty and urban conditions were kind of all clustered around at the center of my research. And I think most people would categorize me as a quantitative researcher, although I used other methods and did other things as well. My teaching, while I was a faculty member, ran the gamut from very small classes, seminars, research experiences for undergraduates, all the way up to the largest class at Notre Dame. I had a class that had about 475 students in it that I would teach regularly. It was an introduction to social psychology class. I even taught a MOOC at Notre Dame. I think it was Notre Dame's first MOOC, massive online open course. And I had the topic of that class was statistics, and I had 20,000 students in that class. So that was quite an interesting teaching experience, I will say. But what I really wanted to talk to you about today is getting work done, and getting it done in a life that has many competing demands. I want to start with an orienting quote today, okay? And this quote is from C.S. Lewis's 1939 essay called Learning in Wartime. And he first gave this as a talk or a sermon, I guess, in October of 1939, about a little over a month after Britain had entered into World War II. So, things were really tense and a lot of upheaval in the world and in Europe, especially at that particular time. All right, and so this is what he wrote. There are always plenty of rivals to our work. We are always falling in love or quarreling, looking for jobs or fearing to lose them, getting ill and recovering, following public affairs. If we let ourselves, we shall always be waiting for some distraction or other to end before we can really get down to our work. The only people who achieve much are those who want knowledge so badly that they seek it while the conditions are still unfavorable. Favorable conditions never come. End quote. That's a little depressing, isn't it? But it kind of seems to be the case in the busy life of a faculty member. And what I want to do is talk to you about how to deal with that reality of that busyness and of those competing demands on your time. Now, why am I the one to talk to you about this? It's not because I'm a president or because I've got some kind of formal expertise on this matter. I don't, okay? But really, it's because people noticed that I got a lot done in my early years of professoring, and they thought that I might have some insights into the matter, and so they started asking me to do these workshops about productivity and managing workload. And in fact, I think it's fair to say that they are right about me getting stuff done. I'm not trying to boast or pat myself on the back here, but a few indicators for you. First of all, I came to my first job at Notre Dame straight out of graduate school. I didn't have a postdoc or anything like that. And after just 3 years on the tenure track, I had tenure. Okay. So I was not just promoted early, I was promoted really early. And then after 3 more years, I was promoted to full professor. Okay. During that time, while I was being an assistant professor and an associate professor, I also chaired my department during that time, which is a very time-consuming job, the way it's configured at Notre Dame. And I managed to outpublish just about everyone in my department while I was chair. I've also always received excellent teaching evaluations. I've won teaching awards, and I've done a large amount of service in my department, in the university, and in my profession, in my discipline. And on top of all that, I was the active parent of 2 young kids, okay? And they do, in fact, actually know my name and appreciate my presence as a parent when they were growing up, okay? Now, again, I'm not trying to brag, well, maybe a little, I don't know. But really just to convince you that I have some street cred when it comes to talking about and thinking about managing workload, okay? As a result, as I said, I've been asked to give workshops about time management as an academic and how to do it as a chair and so on. And people have actually told me that my tips work, okay? So hopefully they will be helpful for you as well if you try them out, okay? And the truth of the matter is that I really did work hard on this aspect of my existence, on workload management, when I started at Notre Dame. I specifically was thinking about how to do it and how to manage it, and I do think it was successful, and I think that's a very fair thing for me to say. When you start out as a new faculty member, and even before probably, you hear a lot of information about the job, okay? And I might call that information opinion as opposed to facts or data, but a lot of people have things to tell you and advice to give you about the job. Well, one thing that I heard constantly, and I still do, is that, quote, you can't get anything done the first year. You can't get anything done the first year. And, there's a good reason for people saying that, because you have new teaching preps and you have a lab to set up if you're in the sciences. You are learning about a new environment and who's who and what kind of committee work you should be doing and things like that. There's a lot of additional stuff that first year that you don't have later on. And so it seems like, you really don't have a lot of time to get things done, right? Because all of that other stuff is pressing on your time. Well, the first thing I want to tell you is that little piece of information is bunk, okay? And I am hoping to show you how to make sure you do well enough in your first year so that when you get to the end of it, you can say that it was bunk, okay? And that you did get something done during your first year, okay? I should also note that I really did not have any kind of head start when it came to teaching when I started this new role at Notre Dame. In fact, I was downright scared about it. I never taught when I was at Wisconsin in graduate school. And I hadn't even been in a classroom for 2 years. The last 2 years I was at Wisconsin. I was writing my dissertation and working on a National Science Foundation project. So I didn't really have hardly any experience with teaching at all. And here I was at this university that was renowned for great teaching. I mean, I was scared. I knew this wasn't a small thing that I could just blow off and not worry about. And I was definitely worried that it could take over my life. But I'm going to tell you today that it didn't, okay? And I'm going to tell you the big secret to making this whole thing work, okay? But first, I want you to take a little inventory, okay? In the description of this video, there's a link to a PDF of something called the Work Styles Inventory. And I want you to stop the video, download that inventory, and you can either, answer it on a separate piece of paper, or you can print it out and answer the questions, okay? It'll only take you about 5 minutes to do it. So just pause the video, download the inventory, and record your answers in some way. And then come back and I'll explain to you how to score it and what it means, okay? Pause the video. Okay, we're back. Scoring this thing. For most of the questions, you give yourself a point, 1 point, if you put yes or 1, okay? If that was your answer, yes or 1, you get a point for that item, okay? But items 3 through 7 are backward, okay? So for those ones, you get a point if you said no or 2, okay? So all of them, you get a point if you said 1 or yes, except 3 through 7. You get a point if you did the opposite thing, you put no or 2, okay? So go ahead and write down your score for each item and then add them up. And again, you might want to pause the video for a second to give yourself a chance to do that and figure out what your score is, okay? All right, now, before I tell you what your score means, I want to tell you the big secret I mentioned just a minute ago, okay? And that secret is, here we go, be a chipper, not a binger. Be a chipper, not a binger. What does that mean? What the heck is that? Well, when I started at Notre Dame, someone gave me a book called The New Faculty Member. The New Faculty Member. This is it right here, okay? The New Faculty Member. This book was written by Robert Boyce, and it was kind of a strange book, actually, to give to a new faculty member because it wasn't actually targeted at new faculty members. It was about new faculty members, and it was targeted to administrators and department chairs and was encouraging them to do more at mentoring and helping new professors develop and succeed. That's what this book was about, okay? What was so great about the book, though, was that Boyce had actually done an empirical study of assistant professors following them all the way through their tenure track years. Now, if you've ever read any of the many books that are out there that are advice for faculty members, you'll know that the advice given in them is not based on empirical study, but instead it's mostly derived from people's own experiences and from older faculty members' kind of faulty memories and their reconstructions of their own assistant professor years, telling their war stories. And I don't want to poo-poo that too much because there's value in that and it's good to hear those kinds of things, and some of it might be good advice, but it might not be. It might be idiosyncratic and they might not even be remembering things right or representing them right. So I would say on the whole, a lot of times the advice probably isn't good advice, and you really have no way of knowing what's good advice and what's not, okay? So, that's what's better and different about what Boyce did. And there's a lot of good information in Boyce's study in that book. And he later wrote a book that was targeted to new faculty members, and this is it right here. It's called Advice for New Faculty Members, okay? And it was based on the same study that generated that first book. And it tells you all the things that you need to know that he learned from his study. It's really an excellent book. I highly recommend it. In fact, when I was the chair of my department at Notre Dame, I bought it for all of my new faculty members, every single one of them, because I thought it was so important for them to read it and really try to absorb what was in that book. When I started doing orientation for the university at Notre Dame, we bought it for every new faculty member who started at the university. That's how important we thought it was. So if you read this book, And I will tell you that it is now out of print. It's harder to find. You can still find copies of it around, though, if you look. Luckily, the used book market is a lot more efficient than it used to be. But you can still find it, and you can probably find it in your library, too. So seek it out. It's worth it, okay? But in the book, you'll find that a great deal of his advice boils down to one simple factor, and that factor is chipping versus binging. Chipping versus binging. Now, Boyce is much slicker and academic sounding than me, so he doesn't call it chipping and binging. Rather, he recommends what he calls working with constancy and moderation. And that's what chipping is, constancy and moderation. But I prefer these labels, chipping and binging, because I think it'll stick with you better, okay? And in fact, I know it does, because it really stuck with people at Notre Dame. You know, I'd be walking around on campus and I'd see somebody that had come through orientation, and they'd immediately go into a story to me about how successful they were being at chipping, and some of them were being very successful about it, and others were not doing so well, and they were kind of guiltily confessing to me that they have not been able to escape from their binging ways. But they all knew whether they were chippers or bingers, and it was for quite a while. It was something that everyone was sort of passing around on campus as an important way of thinking about their work. Okay. Now, what is chipping exactly? Well, it's what Boyce means when he uses those notions of constancy and moderation. You should work on whatever you're doing consistently and in small chunks, okay? A little bit every day. I mean, you don't have to do a huge thing every day. You just have to do a little but substantial thing every day. That's what chipping is, okay? Now compare that to the binging style, where you sort of save up your work for a time when you can get away from everything, all those distractions, put them out of the way, and really concentrate on your projects. We all yearn for those times. I mean, that's what the sabbatical system is all about, right? I mean, how many times have you heard someone say, I can't wait till I go on leave, or I can't wait till I go on sabbatical so I can really get some writing done. You know, I can really focus and dig in, right? People will say that all the time. But I'm here to tell you, as forcefully as I can, don't be a binge worker. With very few exceptions, it is bad for you and your career, okay? And I know we all like to think we're the exception when we're starting off, but that's really not how you want to go at it at the beginning, is thinking that you're the one who's going to be different than everybody else, okay? You know, this is a really important distinction in how we work, and I'm going to kind of prove it to you here by giving you some stuff out of Boyce's book, okay? In Boyce's study of a large group of faculty, he tracked all kinds of things they were doing. And these were faculty members from all kinds of disciplines and all kinds of backgrounds, okay? So this really was a broad study. And he looked at their changing practices and attitudes about work as they were going through their pre-tenure period, okay, from whenever they started up until they went up for tenure. What was the single most important factor, hands down, that predicted whether or not people would get tenure? What was it? What was it? It was whether they binged or chipped. That was the number one thing that predicted whether people were going to get tenure or not. Now, I want to be clear, okay? His findings do not mean that if you binge, you are necessarily going to fail. That's not what it means, okay? I want to be super clear about that. But this is what he found, okay? This is what he found. Take a look at this, okay? Some bingers got tenure, and some did not, okay? Look at that. So there's the bingers. Some of them got tenure, some of them did not, all right? But let's look at the chippers. Here's what happened. All of the chippers got tenure. okay? So that means the group of people that failed to get tenure was made up 100% of bingers. Everybody who failed was a binger. That's a big risk you're taking if you're going to decide to be a binger, all right? Because a lot of those people did not get tenure. If you chip, though, you are on the road to success, all right? Now, before we go any further, I want to see how we did on our little inventory, okay? All right, so if you got between 0 and 4 points, congratulations, you're a chipper. Good for you, okay? Maybe you can help out some of your colleagues, okay? And you want to make sure you stay that way. Keep being a chipper, okay? But you're in a good spot, okay? Your work style is going to lend itself well to the demands of getting tenure, okay? What about 5 to 9? Were you in the 5 to 9 range? Well, it's getting a little dangerous in there, I got to tell you. And as you get up closer to that 9 area, you know, I am worrying about you, okay? So I think you need to listen up in the rest of this talk, okay? And maybe try some of these things I'm going to suggest, okay? How about anybody get 10 or more points? Anybody out there? Oh my God, you are a binger, okay? You need to stay after class for extra help, okay? Let me try to inspire some change in you, okay? Because you are a binger if you've got that many of these items selected, all right? Now, before anybody gets all worked up about this, let me just say that this inventory has only what we would call low levels of psychometric testing, okay? Which translated means I made it up the night before I did the workshop the first time. And I pulled items from here, there, and everywhere. You know, and so it doesn't mean anything scientifically, no, okay. But it does identify a lot of the behaviors and characteristics that are associated with the binging style of working, okay? Now, I also want to reveal something else to you, and that is that I am a natural binger, okay? If I would have taken this inventory back when I was starting off as a new faculty member, my score would have been 11, okay? So I'm definitely in the binge territory. And honestly, even to this day, that is how I really prefer to work. I love it. I love the binge, okay? And in fact, it's been reinforced by my past behavior as well, okay? When I was a grad student, I got a great idea for an article. I thought, I'm gonna hunker down and do this. This is a great idea. I think I could really get this thing published. And so I had a period of time when I didn't have a lot of other demands on my time. And so I just started working on this thing, and I really got obsessed with it and really got into it. I was really enjoying working on it. And so here's what would happen, okay? I would wake up in the morning, and I'd kind of stumble out of bed over to my computer, and I'd start working, you know, and I'm writing away, and I've got an analysis going in my other window over there, and I'm going back and forth, and I'm working away, and I'm just like so into this. I'm pounding away, and I'm doing all this work, and it's going great, you know. And then eventually, as the day progressed, I'd kind of look up and go, oh, it's dark out. I should probably go to bed. Okay, and that's the way it continued for 3 weeks. I was basically doing 16-hour days, just cranking away every single day on this article, and I basically got it done in 3 weeks, okay? And then this article ended up being published, me, single author, in the American Sociological Review, which is the top sociology journal. It's got the lowest acceptance rate and all that jazz. It really was a big winner for me, and set my career off in a great way because I had a single authored piece in our top journal, right? And I'd done it with this binge of 3 weeks, working 16 hours or more probably a day. And so, wow, do more of that, right? That ought to be the psychological message, because it really worked for me, okay? wonderful. And I enjoyed it, honestly. It wasn't some terrible thing that happened to me. I liked doing it. I was into it, okay? Well, the problem is that life changes. And particularly as a new faculty member, you just can't do that kind of thing anymore. Because you've got classes you have to teach, you have committee work and meetings you got to go to, you have graduate students to look after, you have a lab to oversee, whatever it is. There's many, many things vying for your time as a faculty member. And so you just don't have the opportunity to do that kind of thing where you just set everything else aside for 3 weeks and binge on a research project. That's not real. That doesn't happen, okay? What is the binger's natural reaction to that constraint, right? To all those things that are impeding on your time. Well, it's to try to find times to binge, right? That's what you do then. You're trying to think about when can I, put all this stuff aside and dig in. So you really look forward to winter and spring break when you can really hunker down without distraction and get stuff done, right? That's what you do. You start looking for opportunities to binge. The problem is it doesn't often actually work out like that, right? So let's take the spring break example for one. Okay, so you're going through this semester, you're chugging along, you're doing all this work, and here comes spring break. Oh, you can't wait. You're going to write. You're going to do some really great stuff. And so, the students all leave campus on Friday and head off for spring break. And then, so over the weekend, you gave a midterm, though, before the break, and so you got to grade that. So you get that out of the way over the weekend. You do all your grading on papers or the test or whatever it is that you did to sort of cap off the first half of the semester. Okay, and then, you've been cranking all semester long. You've been going at it hard, and you even worked hard over the weekend. So you take Monday off just to recover, okay, and get yourself back in a good headspace. Maybe do your laundry or something, okay? All right, so then Tuesday comes, okay? And so you start going on Tuesday, and you spend that day kind of finding all your files and your books and your articles and trying to remember kind of where you left off and kind of get restarted back on the project, get yourself back into that headspace. Okay, so and you always have to do that when you get back to some work that you haven't been engaged with for a while. So you spend a day doing that, and then it's Wednesday. And your car breaks down. Oh no! And so you end up, wasting the day dealing with that darn thing, getting it towed and getting it taken care of. And figuring out how to get your kids picked up from school because you can't go get them or whatever it is. Okay, and so that the car kind of makes you lose Wednesday. And then Thursday, you start to get back at it, okay? And you do some writing, and you feel good. You're getting some things done, and you're starting to get the wheels under the project again. Okay, and then so that's great. And then Friday comes, and you're like, oh crap, I have to teach on Monday. I got to get ready, and so you spend Friday actually getting ready to teach. And so the time just starts disappearing, and you get to the end of spring break, and you really haven't done much work, right? And that happens all the time. There's all kinds of things that continue to impede on your time when you're trying to have that binge, okay? So what's the real answer? The real answer isn't to try to find times to binge. The answer is, and as people say these days, let me hold your hand when I say this, you got to change yourself into a chipper. That's what you got to do. You got to change yourself into a chipper. I did it, and you can too, okay? If I took that inventory later on in my career, and it's not relevant the same way with my presidential duties, but when I was a faculty member still later on, my score would have been 3, not 11, it would have been 3. And 2 of those points come from taking an incomplete in graduate school, and I can't ever erase those. So those are my albatross I get to carry with me, my scarlet letter from now till the end of time. And so I only have 1 point from things that I could actually change, all right? So I really did shift myself from that binge mode of working into chipping. And I got to tell you that if you do this, if you change yourself into a chipper, you will be happier and you will be more productive. I guarantee it. I absolutely certain that that'll be the case. And in fact, I'll give you a money-back guarantee on this course, okay? That's how sure I am of this, okay? Now, take a look at this chart from Boyce's book, okay? I think it tells the story pretty darn well. We have the different ways he sort of measured output among the faculty members. And then we have it on the left for the binge workers, and then we have it on the right for the chip workers, okay? And those differences are dramatic, okay? Especially the manuscripts accepted, which is the most important marker here. But all of them, okay? The chippers really, way outproduced the bingers, okay? And when you look across their time on the tenure track, I mean, there's just so much more getting done in the chip style of working. Those are really big, dramatic differences, and that ought to shake you into wanting to be a chipper right there. I mean, who do you think's going to get tenure? If you had to place bets on who was going to get tenure, if they belong to the binge group or the chip group, which one would you put your money on? You know, I mean, pretty clear that the chippers are the ones that you want to bet on, okay? All right, how to be a chipper, all right? Well, let's start by talking about what a chipper is, okay? Get real specific about that. A chipper is someone who breaks their work down into small chunks and does a little bit on them every day, okay? They don't let days and days go by without working on a project. They do something substantial, something small, but something substantial just about every day, okay? Even if it's not massive, it really adds up over time, and that's the secret to this thing, is that little bits add up if you do them with regularity, okay? Now, let's talk about research here for a little bit, although this extends to teaching too, as we'll see before it's over. After I read Boyce's book, I realized that I had to do something about the way I worked. In fact, I was scared. I was like, oh my God, I got to do something. And so I decided to give chipping a whirl, okay? To structure it, I set a goal for myself, okay? And that goal was to work 4 hours a day on research and to write 2 pages a day, okay? By 2 pages, I meant 2 solid, reasonably well-polished pages. Not necessarily that I'd never have to touch them again, but something that was beyond a scrawled draft, okay? Like, you know, a good substantial piece of writing for 2 pages, okay? And then whatever had to be done to produce those 2 pages had to be done too, and that would be done in the rest of the 4-hour research time. And the research time included the writing of the 2 pages, okay? All right. So if I had some analysis to do in order to write something in the article or to produce a table or something, the analysis was part of getting the 2 pages done. Or if I had to read some stuff in order to add something to my lit review, that reading was part of getting those 2 pages done. Okay, that's what we had to do. Now, your chip will be different, okay? It depends on your discipline, on you, what kind of work you do, etc. Okay, you'll really have to think that through, and I would encourage you to spend a little bit of time thinking about what would be a reasonable chip for you to be getting done every day. That's not too big that it wouldn't be unmanageable, okay, but is going to make a difference if it adds up over time. Now, for me, and I'm going to continue to use my example as an illustration, but for me, it was that 4 hours and 2 pages that I needed to get done every day, okay? Now, those shouldn't sound like big, tough goals, and they aren't, okay? 4 hours a day on research, I mean, academics constantly complain about working 12-hour days, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, 4 hours on research is really not that big of a deal, okay? Neither is 2 pages. Who can't write 2 pages a day? I mean, it's like 500 words, right? I'm thinking of a page as being 250 words a manuscript page, okay? So 500 words. I mean, you know, you probably write emails longer than that most days, especially if you're mad about something. Okay, really, those are pretty modest goals, okay? Those are not overwhelming by any stretch of the imagination. Furthermore, this is important too. I did not do this on weekends or holidays or vacation. Okay, I did not make myself chip on those days, and you'll see that in a second. So I did not chip on the weekends. Okay, I wanted to spend time with my family, with my kids, and so I didn't do it on the weekends. All right? So I'm really not setting up a hugely demanding schedule here for myself. I'm not. Okay, but stop and think though, how this thing adds up. The way I approach this, I would be working on it about 250-ish days a year, maybe a little less, but okay. At 2 pages a day, in 1 year, I'd be producing 500 manuscript pages. Okay, 500, 250 times 2, there it is. Simple arithmetic. 500 manuscript pages, I mean, that's not too shabby. I mean, it's more than not too shabby. It's fantastic, actually. In my field, that would be about 10 papers, okay? I mean, the best producing research departments in the country would require about 2 papers a year to get tenure. And I'm getting 10 papers worth done in 1 year. Okay, now, I mean, I still have to get them published and all that stuff, but I mean, that's a lot of production, right? It really adds up. Can a binger do it? Can a binger follow this schedule? Well, let me show you proof, okay? Now, I'm going to reveal something to you here that's a little bit embarrassing, but if it helps turn you into a chipper, then it's worth it. Okay, here's my big secret, my big shame. I am just a tad, just a smidge obsessive about tracking my work, okay? I have a spreadsheet for just about everything. You want to know what I worked on from 10 o'clock to noon on March 18th of 2010? I can tell you. Do you want to know how much I ran and my average heart rate during the week of February 7th last year? No problem. I can dig that up for you too, okay? So I have that. I have that bone in my body, okay? More on that in just a second, okay? So when I started doing this, I wrote a spreadsheet to keep track of what was happening so I could figure out whether it was working or not. This was an experiment for me, okay? And I did not think chipping was natural for me, and I didn't know if it was gonna work. So I wanted to find out if it was. Okay, that was the idea in doing this tracking. And I also used it to give myself some incentive. Okay, so this file I created to track it had a graph in it, which I'll show you in just a second. And I put that file in my startup folder in my computer. So when I started my computer up, the first thing that would happen was this graph would pop up about whether I was keeping up on my chipping goals or not, right? And it would say, hey, you haven't done your pages yet today, basically, saying that to me in graphic form. And so it would remind me that every day I got to get my chip done. I got to figure out how I'm going to get those pages written today and spend the 4 hours on research, okay? So that provided a little incentive too. All right, so here's some screenshots from the spreadsheet, okay? Now, this first one is just where I was tracking everything that I was doing, all right? So if you look on here, you'll see, some dates going down the side there, and then what I did, how many pages I produced that day, and how many hours I spent on research. And you'll see that, it's not completely consistent. I don't do 2 every day. Sometimes I get more done, but I'm trying to do 2, and I'm trying to keep up on it. And then there's a column there, E, which is, just a note to myself on what I worked on that day. I was writing a book with my friend Ralph Conant, and so there's a lot of Ralph in there. And a lot of these 3-letter codes are papers that I was working on. OFW is a particular paper I was writing, and so on. And there's other different notes in there where I might make tell myself why I didn't get it done that day, and so on. So you can see different little notes in there about different things. Look, on April 1st, I was depressed. Oh, that's my excuse for not getting my pages done that day, I guess. I don't know. Now, and then the rest of it over on the right was these are all columns that help calculate whether I'm keeping up with my goals or not, and producing these graphs. I'm going to show you in just a second. But you'll see there in the pages goals and the hours goals, there's no goals on Saturdays and Sundays. 0, 0, 0, 0, all the way down. So the goals are only there for Monday through Friday. Okay, and again, like I was saying, I didn't make myself do this on the weekend. Okay, all right. Now the second screenshot here are the graphs. So this is what would pop up on my computer when I started my day. And what I have here is the first, on the left we have the pages, on the right we have the goal, the hours. So the pages on the left, the hours on the right. And basically a 0 means that I got my 2 pages done for the day. So if it's above 0, I kind of got a bonus. That day I got more done than I was aiming for. And then on the lower part, if it's below 0, that means I didn't get it done. I didn't get enough done that day. I got 1 or 0 done that day, okay? And so you can see how that progresses. And then at the bottom of that, below that, the daily graph is the cumulative number of pages that I produced by that point in time, okay? And then the hours, same thing. Over on the right side, it's just tracking the hours, the 4 hours instead of the 2 pages. And again, a 0 means I got it done, okay? So if I had a flat line across there, that would have meant I was meeting my goals, okay? Anything below 0, I didn't make it that day. Anything above 0, I did extra. There's a couple of bad days in there that I might call mini binges. So, you know, I wasn't perfect at doing this, but there it is, okay? And then we have the cumulative number of hours going down there on the bottom, so the amount of hours that I'm adding up doing this work, okay? All right, so that's what that is. And then the third screen, and this one is the important one, I think, because it's adding up what's getting done over time, okay? So this is about 1.5 years into when I started using this system, okay? About 1.5 years, and you can see there's a partial year, year 1, and a partial year 2 at the point that I made this screenshot. And we've got the goals over there that should have been done by this point in time, year 1, year 2, and then since beginning the system, which adds up year 1 and year 2, okay? And then in the middle, we've got what I actually accomplished, okay? And then on the right, whether I'm above or behind where I intended to be at that point. And you know, I always got ahead, and so there was always a surplus of pages and hours. Now look down in the middle on the bottom line in the center. So after about 1.5 years or so of doing this, I had generated 967.5 pages of manuscript, almost 1,000 pages in 1.5 years, okay? And I'd spent about 2,000 hours on research just by following this chipping method. I mean, wow. I mean, chipping, I just look at that and say, chipping works. There's the evidence, okay? It certainly worked for me. There's no question about that. Remember the time before you wrote your dissertation when writing a dissertation seemed like an insurmountable mountain, that it was just going to be so hard, maybe even impossible to climb? Well, my dissertation was about 300 pages long, and using my little chipping system here, I produced 3 times as much as my dissertation. 3 times as much as my dissertation in 1.5 years, okay? And I did that while I was teaching, doing committee work, all the other things that come into your life, all right? This system, I will say, worked for me, and on the basis of that N of 1, I will say it works. Okay, it really was a dramatic change for me in my productivity and my ability to get things done, okay? Who says you can't get anything done the first year? This is why I say it's bunk. There it is, right there on the screen. It couldn't be any clearer. That's basic. I mean, that's a part of my first year, right? Okay, I mean, encompasses parts of my first 2 years. Okay, all right. Where are we? Here we go. Okay. Now, I'm basing an awful lot on just me here. Okay, and maybe I'm some kind of exception to the rule of how life operates. But I don't think that's true. And the reason why is that after doing this for a few years, after doing this workshop, I started receiving testimonials from other people. I mean, bunches of them, probably hundreds by the time it was over. There are many, many more I could tell you about, but I used to put a couple of people's records up on the screen just to illustrate other people who had been assistant professors at Notre Dame and who had, in one way or another, volunteered to me that chipping had changed their lives. It just totally changed how they came at their work. You know, I would bump into them. One of the guys that I would put up, I was at a reception for people who'd gotten their first big grant, and he was there, and he came up to me and he said, "I wouldn't be here if you hadn't given me that chipping talk." You know, and I had other people that would stop me in the hallway and just say, "Chipping changed my life," okay? And the productivity of some of these people was absolutely astonishing. So the people that I would show on the screen, and they had all, like I said, they had all volunteered to me. I didn't ask them. They volunteered to me that the chipping had changed how they came at their work and really made a difference. All of them got tenure early. All of them got tenure early. They had multiple books. There was one person who had 2 full university press books done by the time of tenure. I mean, holy moly. They had big federal grants. They had tons of articles. I mean, these were people from totally different disciplines too, from the humanities to the sciences and engineering, everything in between. Even had one sort of chipping disciple, I guess you'd call, who was in the art department, who was a painter. I mean, that was his academic production, was painting, right? And he stood behind this chipping approach as well. It was something that he thought really changed how he worked. Okay, why does it work? Okay, it's always good to ask that question. We don't want to just depend on my claims here, but here's what I call 7 chipping corollaries and some of the reasons why chipping works so well. The first one is that when you chip, you reduce dramatically the startup costs of getting back into your work. Okay, you know, when you start working on something, you've got to refamiliarize yourself with the project. You've got to find the files, et cetera. All that stuff I described at the beginning of spring break, and that takes time, and it can actually be off-putting in terms of getting to your research because you're kind of dreading the slog of going through that startup cost kind of thing. Well, you never have to do that if you're chipping, because you don't forget where you were. You worked on the thing yesterday, okay? And so you know exactly where you are. You know, your document is still in your most recently open files in your word processor, right? And your files are still all that. And you remember where everything is. It's much, much easier. There aren't any startup costs when you're chipping consistently. When you fear your startup costs, you avoid getting started on big tasks. And that's one of the reasons why it's so hard to actually get going on spring break or winter break. And you don't want that, right? So that's one big advantage that chippers have, just in terms of the churn of work, but also in terms of the psychological dimension of being reluctant to get to work. Okay? Second thing, related to the first in a sense, but chippers have fewer problems with writer's block, okay? The tasks don't seem very big, so they don't seem very intimidating when you're just chipping. You don't need to think about everything you need to do to get the project done. You just need to figure out how to write 2 pages, okay? That's a much smaller. It's nowhere near as tough or intimidating. And so you don't have that psychological block in the same way when you're just going to have to, I just got to write 2 pages. What am I going to write about? Okay, well, I need to work on this. And you're off and running, right? It's much easier to overcome that little piece of starting your work. Third thing is that chipping allows unconscious work time, and Boyce talks about this quite a bit in his book. When you finish partial work, okay, you know what you're going to do next time because you're not done yet, and you know what the next thing is, right? So your brain then has some downtime to work on it a little bit unconsciously while you're doing other things, right? All right? It's still kind of in your head and it's still popping along back there. Versus the binging style where there's so long in between your work segments, right? There's so much time in between that you just totally drop the project and you're not thinking about it and you're not getting the opportunity to have that unconscious work time because it's too far away from your mind, okay? Fourth, you will be able to live a healthier lifestyle if you chip, okay? That routine that I went through when I was writing that ASR piece was not healthy, okay? Did you notice anything missing from that little story that I told you about what I was doing? Eating. Did I mention eating? Did I mention showering? No. Did I mention interacting with other human beings? No. Okay. It's not that I didn't do any of those things, but boy, they were constricted in a very special way during that period, okay? Believe me, if you chip, you won't have that problem, okay? You'll be able to have a more sane kind of existence, and the people around you will be happier too. People around you prefer that you eat and you shower and that you interact with them. Okay? All right. Now, I want to just take a little pause right here and reinforce something very important. Because the first few times I gave this talk, I got some criticism from people that I was somehow trying to push them into some crazy level of productivity and, you know, just working like mad. And they called it the Dan Myers star system, okay? And, you know, and they kind of resented that I was trying to, you know, turn them into these people that just cranking it out. And so I adjusted how I give this talk a little bit. But I also inserted this little section where I said, no, that is not what I'm trying to do. In a sense, I'm trying to do the exact opposite of that. I certainly want you to be a star. I think that would be wonderful, and I hope that you are. But I'm not trying to push you into crazy levels of work, okay? I'm trying to give you a healthy way to come at this where you're not working like that, right? And you're still getting a lot done, even though you're not on a crazy productivity kind of demand or a lifestyle. Okay, that's not what this is about, and I think that's illustrated by the fact that I didn't make myself do this on the weekends or on holidays or things like that. You know, and so that really is the message here: is this is how to get to a sensible kind of approach to managing this work and doing it in a way that's going to be, yes, very productive, but not come out of your hide. Okay? All right. Back to our corollaries. Okay. Number 5, bingers often blame externalities for their production problems, right? It's something else got in my way. Their car broke down the first day of spring break and they lost so much of their quality time dealing with it. Oh, if that wouldn't have happened, that external thing happened to me. Well, chippers rarely do that. You don't hear chippers complaining about externalities interfering with their work so much because they don't have to, okay? Those shocks to the system, they aren't so darn devastating. If you lost a day completely, well, you lost a chip. No big deal. Go back at it the next day and you'll be all right. Oh, you didn't get 2 pages done yesterday. It's not that big of a deal. You're going to get it done today. It'll be fine, right? Those shocks to the system, they just aren't so devastating when you're using the chipping style, when you're working with constancy and moderation, okay? And in fact, the reality is that because your chips are so modest, there's not a big deal to get them done. You can often get them done even when you do have those shocks to the system, okay? If your car breaks down, you might be able to tap out the 2 pages while you're sitting there at the car dealer waiting for them to tell you what's wrong with the thing, right? And so you might still actually be able to get your goals done, and often you can. Even when things are tough, you can still get those kind of modest things done. You can get those chips worked in to your day. Okay? Number 6, this is important too. Chipping involves starting and stopping appropriately. And Boyce talks about that a lot in his books. It's one of the real pieces of value in the book for someone like me, and this is why. The first thing is you have to start before you feel ready. Okay, if you start waiting around until everything's perfect and the muse is there, and you're going to be waiting a long time. Okay, if you just get started, just sit down and start working, you'll get stuff done. You will, right? And it might not feel as wonderful as when you're in that total flow situation, but you'll get stuff done if you just sit down and start doing it. So start before you feel ready. You don't have to prepare everything in the environment and clean your whole house and whatever it is that your pre-work ritual is that's actually often stopping you from working. You don't have to do all that. Just sit down and start going at it. Get that chip done. Okay, you'll feel really good. But here's the harder part for me anyways, is you also need to end when you plan to. And you can see in my graph and my tabulation of my work that it wasn't always easy for me to do that, okay? But end when you plan to, okay? Don't wait until you're exhausted and burn out before you stop working, okay? Don't make your fatigue be the thing that stops you from working. Stop when you plan to. It helps you keep your chips manageable, and then you won't dread heading back to work so much, back to that experience that just tapped you out completely last time you did it. If you stop when you ought to, it won't feel like this devastating thing that happened to you, and it's easy to do it again the next day. I did that yesterday, I could do it again today, right? And then the third part of this time thing with starting and stopping appropriately is to pick the right time of the day to do your chips as you're planning your day. Okay, so plan your chips for your most productive times. Now, for me, especially as I've gotten older, the best time for me to do this kind of writing or research or creative work is early in the morning. It just so happens that's the way I function. Okay, it might be very different for you, but what you don't want to do is you don't want to waste your most alert and creative times on kind of mundane tasks like answering email or grading, God forbid, grading a multiple choice test or something like that. A lot of times people do stuff like that to get them out of the way so they can really focus on their work and not have that distracting them. That's not what you should do. You should use that, if that's the time that's going to be most productive for you, you got to use that for your chip, right? Right? Don't waste that productive time on kind of mundane things that don't really require that. You can grade a multiple choice test and answer your email when you're tired, but you can't do as well on your research work where you really need to be at the top of your game when you're tired. Seventh and last, chipping corollary, tracking your work. Okay. Tracking your chipping work can be very reassuring in convincing you to stick with it, even when you want to binge, okay? Man, I'm telling you, there is nothing like looking back at my charts for a few months or that summary page at the end especially to convince me that I was doing the right thing, right? Those first couple of years were incredibly productive, and I could see that happening. And I would, when I was like, I don't know if I want to do this today, but the graph popped up, or I was like, I'm gonna go on a big binge over spring break. I would go back and look at this thing and go, no, I'm going to keep doing this. This is really working for me. And so if you do that and keep track of things, you'll see how the chipping is adding up, and it'll help you sustain yourself even when you really want to do something different. Okay. All right. Now, as I've been talking about this, I've been referring mostly to research work. The reason I chose to do that is because when people say you can't get anything done the first year, that anything that they're talking about usually refers to your research, your writing, your creative production, that piece of your existence. And it is tougher to manage that kind of stuff because it doesn't have the same kind of structure to it. It's relatively unstructured. One of the challenges, one of the great things and the challenges of being academic is when it comes to that kind of work, there aren't really a lot of deadlines, or there's less deadlines. There's fewer deadlines, okay? Now, teaching is very important. Okay, I don't want to downplay teaching at all when we're talking about this, but it has built-in pressure that forces you to get it done. Okay, I mean, there's going to be 30 people sitting in that class in front of you on Monday, staring at you, expecting you to deliver some material, right? And so you've got to get something ready for them, right? And you're going to do that because that is inherent in the structure of the teaching task. You have to have assignments prepared and then graded. You have to write your final exam and grade it, and all those different things get done because they have deadlines associated with them. And so, it kind of makes it happen independent of whether you want to do it or not. You're going to do it because you've got those deadlines in there. Okay, so teaching is different in a sense, but the general principles of chipping apply to teaching prep and grading and all that stuff as well. All those same principles apply in the same way to teaching. But I want to add a couple of things as you're thinking about achieving an appropriate, reasonable balance between your research work and your teaching work. And that balance, what that balance looks like, what that appropriate balance looks like, is going to be really different depending on what kind of school you're at. And some teaching is a much bigger part of the portfolio, and others research is a bigger part. So you've got to make that judgment for yourself. But the general principles apply in trying to produce the right balance, whatever that balance might be at your school. Okay. Now, for the reasons I have just mentioned, the teaching task can be really seductive, and it can kind of start expanding to fill your time. But even at a teaching-intensive school, you need your research and your scholarship to continue to develop if you want to produce an academic record and you want to stay current and involved in your discipline and things. So even in a teaching-heavy place, you need to be thinking about how to get that research stuff done. So often with teaching, on the other hand, it turns out that it's a matter of controlling it rather than getting to it to get it done, right? And that's that's part of how these two things interact with each other, is that you got to keep the teaching under control through chipping in a way that allows you to have the chips for your research and scholarship. Okay? All right, so I'd recommend a couple of things when you're thinking about that interplay. Okay? First, set a weekly limit on how much time you're going to spend on teaching. Okay? Think about all the pieces that you need to do. Okay? Prepping classes, grading, meeting with students, actually being in class. Okay? All the stuff that's associated with doing your teaching work. Okay? Make it reasonable so you can actually get it done, but set it up so that you're leaving the appropriate amount of time for your research and writing chips. Okay? You don't want those to languish or to kind of by default of teaching expanding just kind of get edged out, right? You don't want that to happen. So plan your teaching in a way that controls it enough that gives you the room for the research and the scholarship chips. Okay? Second, don't force yourself to binge when you're teaching, okay? Try not to prep too many new classes in one semester or 1 year if you can help it, okay? Spread out, within a class, spread out or phase your assignments across your different classes so you don't have all your grading stacked up at one time, all right? You make everything due at the same time in the last week of classes, okay? Well, now you just forced yourself into a grading binge, right? Try not to do that. Try to sequence things so that your workload is more even in terms of teaching across the semester. Then there won't be a binge that forces you out of your research and your scholarly production piece for a while because you've just got a binge on the teaching piece, okay? Don't do that. Third, do the hardest thing first. And by hardest, I don't mean the most intellectually demanding, although that might be the right thing to do if that's your, if the first thing in the day is your creative, productive time. But what I really mean is do the thing that's hardest to get yourself to do. And most of the time, that's not the teaching task. That has its own presses and logic and its own demands that force it to get done. It's not that hard to get yourself to do the teaching piece. because it just has to be done because of the structure of teaching. Okay. Fourth thing, don't over prep your classes. Set a reasonable amount of time to prepare and stick with it. Okay. I found when I overdo it, actually, those are my worst classes. Trying to cover too much material, or I've got too much detail in my notes. Those are ones where I'm not as successful in my class. So keep your prep to a reasonable chip, and know that you're not going to, cover every darn thing that you possibly could, right? It's not going to kill you to not know every possible detail or cover every possible detail about the material in your class, right? If somebody asks something that you don't know, it's okay. Just say you don't know, and it's a great question. Wow, you're so brilliant for thinking of that question. Let me look into that, and I'll find out for you, and I'll come back and we'll talk about it in the next class, and you can do that. And it'll be fine, right? Just, admit that you don't have to know everything. You can't know everything, and maybe students they actually can. No matter how hard you prep, they can come up with questions that you weren't anticipating, okay? And that's okay, it'll be fine, right? Last one. Let other people do some of the work. And this is a little ego check, too, for all of us. Some people feel guilty when they are having students do presentations in class. They're using up valuable class time for student presentations. Or they also might feel guilty when they're using other people's materials to prepare their lectures, right? It should come from me. All of this should come from me. All of the prep should come from me, and all of the presentation should come from me in the class. I'm the teacher. I'm the professor. That's dumb. Okay, that's not a smart way to come at this. It turns out, first of all, that it's good for students to shoulder some of the work of teaching the class. They actually are more engaged, and they retain information better, and they just have overall better experience in the class if they're part of generating the knowledge in the class and not just sitting there absorbing from you. Okay? Also, and this is the ego check part, other people might actually be better at this than you. Okay? Just because you're the professor doesn't mean that you're all of a sudden the best professor who ever taught that course, right? Why reinvent the wheel with brand new material that you're creating from scratch when you could get some help from somebody else's material, right? Spend your chips on something else, right? There's a lot of good stuff out there that other people have produced that's commercially available that can help you, or you might have notes and things from somebody else who's taught the class. Of course, you're going to have to work some to make them your own, but you don't have to start all over reinventing the wheel when you teach the class. Let somebody else do some of that work. You don't have to do it all, and then you have more time to do some other things. All right, I think that wraps up what I have to say to you, and I hope I have convinced you to come over here from the dark side. That's where you are now, you bingers. You're on the dark side. And join the cult over here of chipper chippers, okay? Life is pretty good over here, I gotta tell you. And I think it'll be better for you if you come over too and try to use this chipping style. All right. Thanks for watching. I hope this has been helpful. We can't do a Q&A as we would normally do if we were live, but I'll try to watch the comments and respond to any questions you might have. So for now, get out there and get a chip done and take care of yourself. Bye-bye now.